Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 279 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review I'm going to be talking about a California-based singer-songwriter who has really been, garnering a lot of success and a lot of hardcore fans in the indie scene over these last few years. Releasing a debut album in 2017 that got lots of acclaim, as well as two collaborations after that, and just now with her second full-length album as a solo artist. Of course, I am referring to the singer-songwriter known as Phoebe Bridgers, and I am here to review her latest full-length album, which came out on June 19th, 2020. And the album is called Punisher. As you can see, I got this on vinyl. I've been wanting to review this album for a little while now, because, dare I say it, this may very well be my favorite album of 2020. I will get into the album in a little bit, but first, gotta show you the album cover. Really interesting. She looks like she's in the middle of the desert with the red light shining on her. It actually fits the tone of the album very well. And there's the back. There's 11 tracks on here. It's over 40 minutes long. Released on Dead Oceans, indie label. And there are the liner notes there, the writing credits. Produced by Ethan Gruska and Tony Berg, who also handled co-production with her on her debut album. And this is a really cool booklet. It's got like the lyrics as well as little pencil drawings inspired by the song content. So the drawings were done by Chris Rydell, is the name of the artist. And here's side A, and then there's side B. Yeah, I got this at Chunk, which, I've mentioned this store quite a few times in my reviews. Definitely one of my favorites. That is the vinyl packaging for Punisher, the new album from Phoebe Bridgers. So, Phoebe Bridgers, is definitely an artist I have a somewhat interesting kind of relationship with. When I first heard her debut album, I was kind of lukewarm on it, though I did appreciate her, talent for writing very emotionally potent songs, and there certainly were quite a few highlights on that thing. I found the somewhat dreamy, kind of low-key aesthetic to be a little bit underwhelming. However, as years have passed, though, I have found ways to enjoy Phoebe a little bit more, and that is kind of due to her latest collaborations, her Boy Genius project with Julian Baker and Lucy Dacus, fellow indie songwriters that are very much in her vein, and a recent project with the one and only Connor Oberst from Bright Eyes, Better Oblivion Community Center, which was a kind of divisive project. Some, purist fans kind of detracted from this album's kind of more straightforward indie rock aesthetic. Personally, though, I think Connor and Phoebe had great chemistry together, hence why I even did a full-length review of that album 1 year ago. go. So this is my second time actually reviewing a Phoebe Bridgers project. So I definitely went into this genuinely pretty excited because there were some great teaser tracks, and I definitely felt like Phoebe was on a slow but definitely very like sure path to greatness for sure. And sure, so I definitely knew that this album was going to be nothing less than just a very quality, somewhat depressing singer-songwriter record. But I didn't know that it would be the like ever relevant album for 2020, or the like genuine like emotional masterpiece of 2020 that this album really is, because that is exactly what Punisher is. It's definitely a masterpiece for sure. Sure, so much a masterpiece that I definitely do kind of take back my initial lukewarm reception of her music. I mean, her debut album has definitely grown on me as of right now. I mean, though I think the thing that keeps me from loving it is that the production gets kind of old and somewhat one-dimensional after a while, but there is some great songwriting on there. Phoebe's voice is definitely quite beautiful. Some, definitely nice little guest spots on that record here and there too. But this record definitely is the like much needed step forward from that debut, which sort of was the building blocks for her eventual kind of prolific career. This album kicked things off on a bit of a low-key note with the track DVD Menu, which is basically a little instrumental intro. Definitely somewhat spooky, kind of Chelsea Wolfe-inspired kind of thing, but it definitely sets the tone for the album very well with these, with these eerie synth atmosphere, along with some kind of sweeping strings and maybe some acoustic guitar in the mix as well. And it transitions very well into the first actual track on here, Garden Song, which was a great teaser track for this thing. The song opens, I just got to review the opening lines, and that'll sort of tell you what an amazing lyricist Phoebe really is. It says, "Someday I'm gonna live in your house up on the hill, and when your skinhead neighbor goes missing, I'll plant a garden in the yard, and then they're gluing roses on a flatbed. You should see it. I mean thousands. I grew up here till it all went up in flames, except the notches in the door frame." Like, I wonder if, maybe she's singing about, like, maybe love on the song. She definitely, obviously the song is definitely very sad, and, it's sort of like you want something and yet you can't really, get it. You kind of have to work hard in order to, like, really get there. It's a sentiment that I think really a lot of people can, relate to, and even I can, for sure. Musically, I think the track is beautiful. Love the baritone guitars, the kind of stuttering synth notes, the gleams of 12-string guitar, the bassy male background vocals I think are very nice too. It definitely is a very nice sort of way to open the record and sort of get the listener to strap in, because this is going to be one emotionally intense experience. Then we get into the song Kyoto, and when I heard this as a teaser track, I definitely knew that this album was going to be a much more accessible and maybe a much louder Phoebe album, which in a way it kind of is, even though it's still very much the sort of atmospheric folk music that she's known for. The song is kind of about her first trip to Japan, I've heard, and there are some pretty, sad lines, like the line of, he said you called on his birthday, you were off by like 10 days, but you get a few points for trying. There's this like, it just goes into the heart and just rips it all apart, even if the song definitely is one of the more upbeat moments on the record, which is definitely what I love about it. It's definitely a real sense of catharsis. I think the horns on the track sound great. I definitely really like the jangly sort of power pop guitars and drums on that song. Phoebe just absolutely kills it vocally in that chorus. It's definitely one of the standouts here, and definitely shows her kind of, just, letting her, just letting herself bloom on display. Uh, then we go into the title track, which is this very kind of spacey and sort of electronic folk ballad with these liquid pianos and kind of swirling synths. Kind of like it's a kind of dramatic strings coming halfway through, some kind of robotic vocoder vocal harmonies, which are definitely very nice. It definitely is the kind of thing that sounds very Bon Iver inspired, and also, but the lyrics, are pretty much literally Phoebe having a figurative conversation with one of her biggest influences, Elliott Smith. And as someone who's been listening to Elliott's music since I was like 14 years old, I definitely kind of relate to this song and how it sort of is Phoebe wishing that, she could tell Elliott how much his music meant to her. And, she's even going as far as to walk right by the house where he lived with Snow White, as well as, maybe going into one of his favorite bars or stuff like that. And also, with poeticisms like, I hear so many stories of you at the bar, most times alone, and some were looking your worst, but never not sweet to the trust funds and punishers, and sort of calling her a copycat killer with a chemical cut. So somehow the story takes a kind of misery kind of esque tone to it, which is definitely very much a compliment. It's definitely one of the highlights here. The song Halloween is definitely a track that, while yes, in typical Halloween song fashion, does have this kind of spooky tone and what have you, but really the lyrics give Halloween sort of a whole new meaning, like as a holiday where, you would be more honest than you would be otherwise, which is kind of interesting, and I know Anthony Fantano also pointed this thing out in his review too. It's kind of interesting, how it is kind of what the song's about, because, you think of Halloween and, dressing up and stuff, but, underneath the mask, there's definitely some raw emotion in there. And also, the line of, "They killed a fan down by the stadium, was only visiting, they beat him to death," was a little unexpected, whoa, that's a plot twist right there, Phoebe. And the song is definitely very beautiful, twangy guitars, I think the kind of howling, what sounds like synth or something like that, I think sets the tone very well. Love these sort of layers of cult-like percussion that come in halfway through lovely little piano notes. And there's got to be Conor Oberst on the backup vocals and on co-writing if you're going to have a song this dark and this tear-inducing. The track Chinese Satellite definitely is another moment on here that really sees Phoebe kind of expanding her sound and sort of allowing her most authentic self to fully bloom. Even though the track does start out kind of like a typical, very low-key Phoebe ballad, with lines about, drowning out the morning birds with the same 3 songs over and over, and taking a tour to see the stars, but they weren't out tonight, so she wished hard on a Chinese satellite. But then, I think the song transitions. This intro transitions very well into some very progressive strings that eventually bleed into these noisy, fuzzy guitars and drums. definitely showing a little more of a punk rock aesthetic coming through, and coming through with an instrumental that kind of reminds me of maybe something Mitski could be doing. Ski could be doing. It's a very smooth transition, and I definitely really enjoy it for that reason. The reason. Then we have the track Moon Song, which seems to be the one song that I think most critics have said is probably the weakest here. Personally, though, I do love it because it has, it is one of the, it definitely is one of the saddest tracks on the record. I mean, the lyrics about, like, hating Tears in Heaven, but sort of feeling empathy for Eric Clapton's Baby, as well as fighting over John Lennon till she got to bed upset. It's like, it's very hard to listen to, even though it definitely is beautiful, and, I love her singing on this track, and the kind of, and the and also the filtering on the acoustic guitars is definitely very nice. Also, the point where the mellotron strings enter is definitely very eerie. It gives it a nice eerie touch. So, and also she's talking about seeing this person at a nautical themed birthday party she's having. So it's kind of a song about sort of loving someone, but not really loving yourself. So it's kind of like someone loves you, but they don't love themselves back. It's definitely a very heart-wrenching moment on the album. The track Savior Complex, compositionally, is definitely one of the standouts here. I've heard lots of comparisons of the song to, like, Elliott Smith's Waltz Number 1 from his XO record, and I definitely can hear that. Melodically, it definitely is very similar to that. But then, the song also features these really gorgeous strings and what sounds like maybe an auto harp put through some sort of guitar filter or something like that. And then there's even a point in the song where there are these filters on the instrumental bridge that are very gorgeous and kind of they're very very gorgeous and kind of give the instrumental a sound as if it's being recorded in water or something like that. It's definitely a very cool production effect that I would have never expected. And also, lyrics like drift off on the floor, I drag you to the shore, sweating through the sheets, you're gonna drown in your sleep for sure. I don't know if she's written like that bona fide murder ballad yet, but I definitely know that it's in her. She definitely could write that kind of song. The song and what she does vocally over top of this instrumental, like the point where she gets into that higher register, is incredible. Incredible. Then we go back into the more expansive instrumentals with the track "I See You," which was titled "I See You" when it was released as a single. It's me. And the song is also a very cathartic, kind of triumphant moment on the record. It's sort of like Phoebe's victory lap on this album. She comes through with this very she comes through with this vocal performance where you could definitely feel a kind of true sense of anger kind of coming out of her voice when she's singing lines like, I used to light you up, but now I can't even get you to play the drums, which is kind of a sequel to the line from her song Scott Street, where she said, I asked you how I was playing drums. You said that shit's too much to carry. So, in this context, that line is definitely quite depressing, for sure. So, for sure, musically, I think it sounds great. I do really like the layers of gothy guitar feedback. The kind of the drums definitely have somewhat of a a sound that's more similar to pop music than anything she's ever done. Also some killer vocal harmonies on this track. Definitely one of the highlights here. And I'm going to make yet another Mitski comparison and say this song sounds like a punkier version of something off of her Be the Cowboy album. Next we go into the twangy Graceland Too, which features this very beautiful kind of country instrumentation. I definitely think emo bluegrass may be a fair thing to call this track, because it definitely musically has that aesthetic, but then lyrically it is just so sad. Like that's so sad. And also beautiful vocal harmonies from her Boy Genius bandmates on this track. Julian and Lucy absolutely kill it, especially near the end where there's that really complex kind of melodic outro where they're doing these like layers of vocal harmonies. It's just like, it's heavenly, honestly. So honestly, and I think it's interesting how, she kind of tells this story initially from a third-person point of view, and then eventually determines that the girl she's been talking about this whole time is her. And then there is the closing track, I Know the End, which is, easily the best song of 2020 for a lot of reasons. One, it definitely is, it may have been written before 2020 and potentially 2019, but it is even more relevant today because it sort of talks about kind of the collective dread that I think a lot of us have been experiencing. I wouldn't call this a politically charged anthem. This isn't a Killer Mike level kind of statement, but it definitely is more talking about how, the world, how society only gets a little bit more depressing and dark as time goes on. I mean, some of the lines about, like, driving out into the sun and then, like, screaming along to an America First rap country song, and then coming across a rundown area with a slaughterhouse and an outlet mall. And she's sort of in this moment, like, she like hates this moment so much that she's kind of fantasizing about being back home, which is kind of relatable because we're all at home right now because of the pandemic. Musically, the track is definitely very complex. It's got it starts out in typical Phoebe fashion, a kind of low-key, slow burner, but then eventually it builds up with these drums, these really beautiful strings, these triumphant horns, what sounds to me kind of like, heavy metal inspired guitars. She's definitely pulling a My Chemical Romance on this track, and I definitely mean that in the best way. Then the song ends triumphantly with these huge group vocals going, "The end is here," and then the song has this sudden key change that gives it a even more sinister tone. And then of all things we have Phoebe basically just screaming her heart out, which I anticipated this record would probably be mostly kind of low-key ballads, and I still would have probably considered it album of the year if that were the case. But yeah, but when you have this very intense and kind of disturbing outro for the song, it's I can't explain it. It's just a very powerful moment, and I will say that Phoebe also captured very well just how I feel about 2020. I've had it with this terrible year. Just way to bring the rage there, Phoebe. Yeah. I love this record. It definitely is one that, very much exceeded all of my high expectations that I had going in. So going in, I definitely knew that this was probably going to be a really solid record, but definitely didn't expect that she would go this far to make the album that I think 2020 needed. I mean, if you want to just cry your heart out and you want some sad music to help you get through this very sad year, this is definitely a perfect album for that situation. It definitely is very Elliott Smith, so thus, she may not be the most original songwriter on the planet, but then again, that's kind of the thing with this indie revival, is not too many, not a whole lot of originality going on, even if there is definitely very good songwriting talent, but she definitely manages to make this kind of aesthetic her own with some real lyrical talent, some very interesting instrumentals that definitely, kind of embrace a variety of different sounds, and while still coming off as very cohesive. It's definitely Phoebe's best album, and certainly one. Certainly one that it's not just an album for this year. It's kind of an album for the ages. Yeah, I'm thoroughly impressed with this thing. Don't have anything negative to say. So I think this is the second 10 out of 10 album of this year, folks. That's my review of Punisher, the new album from Phoebe Bridgers, and I'll see you for episode 280.